Quorum. Just ask that you would keep the Hunter family in prayer. They are traveling on some personal business, dealing with their family, and also pray for Miss Spearing, who's apparently celebrating her wedding anniversary on a cruise, and we want to congratulate her in her absence. I'm going to ask that Mrs. Danice Joseph, my Leadership Nashville classmate with Urban Housing Solutions, lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Awards and recognition, Shay Steele.
Good evening. It's my pleasure tonight to recognize our National Board Certified Teachers, the newest inductions. In 1989, the National Board published What Teachers Should Know and Be Able to Do. It's a document that articulated the National Board's 5 core propositions for teaching. Similar to medicine's Hippocratic Oath, the 5 core propositions set forth the profession's vision for accomplished teaching and underscore the accomplished teacher's commitment to advancing student achievement. Together, they form the basis of all National Board standards and the foundation for National Board certification. Those propositions are: teachers are committed to students and their learning. Teachers know the subjects they teach and how to teach those subjects to students. Teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. Teachers think systematically about their practice and learn from experience. And teachers are members of learning communities. Created by teachers, for teachers, National Board Certification is the profession's mark of accomplished teaching. It's built upon the National Board standards and the 5 core propositions, rigorous and performance-based. It's based on multiple measures, peer-reviewed, it's voluntary, and it's valid and reliable. To date, more than 110,000 teachers in all 50 states and the District of Columbia have achieved National Board Certification. I have one in my family. My sister's a National Board trainer in Kentucky. So tonight we recognize 6 MNPS teachers who've received their National Board Certification in December 2014. So I'm going to call them up and we'll give them a certificate. And Dr. Gentry and Dr. Register, if you'll come forward and get your picture made with this team. The first one is Teresa Agee at McGavock High School, who is a math teacher. Thank you. You'll just stand right over here. If y'all come on forward. Rachel Good at Hunters Lane in art. Is it Rachel Good? Did I say it? That's okay. Thank you. I mispronounced it. It's Rachel Good. Jill Peoples, who is in the central office. She's the Community Outreach Coordinator, National Board Certification in English Language Arts. And if I pronounce it wrong, I'm sorry. Meredith Sorabi, Mount View Elementary School, Grade 3, National Board Certification in Literacy, Reading, Language Arts. Did I pronounce it right? Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Marla Strite at Granbury Elementary School, librarian, National Board Certification, Library Media, Early Childhood through Adulthood. And our final recognition tonight is Jane Weaver, Martin Luther King, French, National Board Certification, World Languages Other Than English. Hold your certificate.
School of Science and Math, Vanderbilt, Angela Eads. Brainiac children.
This is a good one.
I know.
Good afternoon, Dr. Register and members of the board. My name is Angela Eads, and I'm the director of the School for Science and Math at Vanderbilt. This is our our 8th year, and this is an exemplary partnership between Vanderbilt University and MNPS. And so on behalf of Dr. Virginia Shepard, Vanderbilt scientist, professor, and director of the Center for Science Outreach, I'd like to just express our gratitude for your support. Today I'm here to introduce to you 3 students and also briefly describe some of our recent successes with the program. So the SSMV is a 4-year high school program. Students apply in 8th grade, and they commit to attending class at Vanderbilt 1 day a week for their entire high school tenure. They also attend classes during the summer. At the conclusion, they have earned 7 honors course credits, and to date, we've had 4 graduating classes who attend universities, including Stanford, MIT, Yale, Williams, Duke, University of Chicago, and Vanderbilt. So annually, we have around 150 applications for the 26 spots in our 9th grade class. We have 99 students right now. They represent 8 MNPS high schools. And we have all of our courses that are led by PhD scientists. So the goal of all of our courses is to immerse students hands-on into research-based curriculum that integrates science, technology, math, and engineering. And a hallmark of this curriculum is in junior year when our students get placed in labs around campus with a professor. They spend the better part of a year as a part of a research team, and they work on an independent research project that then in senior year we write up for national science competitions and also for publication in journals. I brought along some copies of Young Scientist Journal today so that you could get a taste of some of their research. We also will apply to the Siemens competition, which is a national competition where in the past 5 years we have had 15 semifinalists and 3 finalists. So this year's Siemens competition had a record number 2,263 students submitting projects. Tennessee had 3 recognitions, including 2 students from the SSMV. So Kamran Shirkadeh, forward. He was named a semifinalist. Abel Shi, I'm standing beside him. He was named a regional finalist, and so for this, Abel received a all-expense-paid trip to MIT this past December, where he participated in the 2nd round of competition. So I will give them a moment to share a little bit about their research. But first, I also wanted to introduce Alex Jolly, and he is this year's winner, and he's a semifinalist in the Intel Science Talent Search. Now this competition is another national competition that is actually termed the Junior Nobel Prize. And so this year there were 1,800 entries. 300 semifinalists were chosen, including Alex. So he was one of Tennessee's 3 winners, and he will soon be featured in a story on National Public Radio. So I wanted them to have the chance to introduce themselves, their MNPS school, and what their project was about to you. So thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Hello, my name is Kamran Shirkadeh. I go to Martin Luther King Magnet High School, and my project was called Investigating the Lymphotoxic Activity of Batrachochytrium dendropatitis, and that is just a fungus that infects amphibian species worldwide. And my project looked at the mechanisms that the fungus uses to suppress the immune systems of the amphibians it infects. Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Abel Shi. I also attend Martin Luther King Academic Magnet School, and the title of my project was Targeted MERTK Inhibition Improves the Response of BRAF Mutant Melanomas to Vemurafenib. And essentially, what we sought to find were alternate treatment options for patients who suffer from a highly deadly form of skin cancer, and hopefully extend their survival rate. And yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex Jolly, and I'm a Hillsborough High School senior. My project was entitled Activation of Silent Biosynthetic Pathways in Cave Microorganisms for Drug Discovery. During the one-year internship, I worked in the Laboratory for Biosynthetic Studies under Dr. Bachman, and I exposed bacteria from regional cave environments to a variety of different stimuli that were meant to activate their metabolic pathways in order to hopefully produce new compounds that could have beneficial medicinal properties.
So if possible, could we have Dr. Register and Dr. Gentry pose for some photos
Only if it
with
rubs
these
off.
winners?
Take some at home.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to commend the program at Vanderbilt. On the 25th of February, Ms. Spearing and I were able to visit their center and site, and it was newly renovated, and the students were immersed in their work. So
Very
it was
good.
a great program, great opportunities for students.
I whispered to one of them, I said, did they tell you to give like a dummy version in parentheses after you gave the title? Because all I have is fungus, skin cancer, and something about a cave. But I will do my best to say those things with pride and much appreciation for all that you all have done. That's a lot of dedication and hard work.
Right.
May I say one thing?
You may, two things.
I would like to recognize Dr. Virginia Shepard, who is, I think, the founder of the program. And Harvey's photo. What a great opportunity for our kids. I think, Harvey, you said that we had the highest percentage of any district in the country. Is that right, to win? Yeah. Great. Speaks to the quality of the program.
That's right. Speaking of the quality of the program, I mentioned at the last board meeting that I had received a packet of notes from Ross Early Learning Center. And this is a note. It says, "Greetings from the Ross ELC families. Please see the enclosed letters. We hope that you will enjoy them and share them with the other members of the board, Dr. Register and Mrs. Wiltshire. We wanted to share some of the specific things we had in things we and our children love about the new program. Again, thank you for your investment in and dedication to serving our children, especially those just entering formal academia. The pre-K experience has been wonderful." So I went through it. It's a packet, and I pulled a couple that I will tell you that if you put all of these things together, they represent a model learning environment regardless of the age level. And so apparently, each of the families was given the opportunity to complete a slip of paper and sort of complete the sentence that says, "Our favorite part of Ross so far is." One of them says, "The family-friendly environment that has been provided, not only for the students, but the parents as well. My son loves his school, friends, and teachers at Ross. Thank you for providing a wonderful learning environment for our children." The next one says, "Our favorite part of Ross so far is the enthusiasm of the staff and the diversity in her classroom." And then finally, "Our favorite part of Ross so far is that the communication between parent and teacher is excellent. All the staff is super friendly, and my child loves to come to school. The teachers make learning fun." Can we do this just across? I'm just asking. Simple request. But This was just a sampling of the notes that were in the packet, and I sincerely believe that what we have done at Ross, and I'm sure at Casa Asafran, because we got a packet, I think, from those students as well that was sent to Mr. Pinkston, just exemplifies what it means to create an environment that's conducive for learning, that's conducive to creating the right kinds of partnerships, not just between the district and the school, but between the schools and those families. So I thank all of you, Dr. Register, Ms. Wiltshire, Jay Steele, everybody, anybody who had anything to do with the ability for Ross to be what it is today, as well as Casa Asafran, and then the future one that we're going to have out in Antioch at the library. And Buena Vista. Bordeaux. Not Bordeaux. Thank you so much. Public participation is next. So each person will have the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. At the end of those 3 minutes, you will hear that sound, and I'll have to ask you to cease and let the next person. So I'm going to call you up, and please come to the podium in the order in which your name is called. First, we have Reverend Dr. Judy Cummings, followed by Shell Baldwin, Chris Moth, and then Anne Marie Farmer.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Dr. Judy Cummings, president of IMF, the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship. And I'm here this evening to share with you an open letter that you received via email that's been signed by 13 organizations who are interested in the process, the hiring process of the next director of schools. Many of them are here this evening, and they are standing. It reads as follows. Dear Chairwoman Gentry and members of the Metropolitan Board of Education, we believe identifying and selecting the next director of schools is the most important decision you will undertake during your term. Like the members of your board, we represent a wide range of diverse views, perspectives, constituencies, but our organizations are united in our belief that public participation in the Director of Schools search should be extensive, inclusive, authentic, and continuous. We appreciate your stated commitment to engaging the community in this important work. Since the public participation role has yet to be defined, we have given this issue much thought and suggest that the following components should be reflected in the search process. Component number 1, parent survey. Metro Schools has made strides in recent years in its ability and willingness to survey MNPS families. Parents should be surveyed to solicit their views regarding the future of Metro Schools and its next director. Component 2, stakeholder meetings. The search firm and board members should schedule multiple stakeholder conversations across the city to receive input regarding the desired qualities, experience, and abilities of the next director of schools. Component number 3, real engagement, opportunities with the finalists. We suggest that each finalist participate in a structured but accessible community forum with the opportunity to respond to questions as part of the final stage of the search. Component number 4, community involvement should be ongoing. A community advisory task force could be appointed to assist and advise the search firm and board in developing and promoting public participation during the search. This group should represent the full diversity of our community and stakeholder groups. We recognize and respect that the decision to select the next director of schools rests solely with the school board. We also believe that Metro Schools and the new director cannot be successful without the active support and partnership of the community. We look forward to discussing our proposal with you. This letter has been signed by the president of the Interdenominational Ministers Fellowship, Metropolitan Nashville Education Association, NAACP, Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, Nashville Black Chamber of Commerce, Nashville Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, Service Employees International Union, Stand for Children, Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, Urban Housing Solution, Urban League of Middle Tennessee, and the USW Local 9426. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, Shell Baldwin.
My name is Shelley Baldwin. I have 2 kids in metro schools, collectively racking up 15 years between them. I can tell you over those years I have forgone countless hours with my kids so that I could help raise funds for our school. Sadly, the funds are not used for enrichment for the students. Instead, the thousands of dollars that countless parents raise go towards things that teachers need but the district cannot fund. The funds aren't there because the state has chosen not to meet their legal obligation of BEP 2.0, thereby leaving us almost dead last in the nation for education funding. We are going on year 8 of losing upwards of $14 million in state funding a year for MNPS alone. No one in this room denies that we are woefully underfunded, but it seems that some are willing to stay with the status quo. Some of you want to continue to ask Nashvillians to pay their taxes and fund 2/3 of our public education, while you give the state a pass on intentionally shortchanging our students. You want more time to mull it over and talk about having meetings with the new Commissioner of Education. Dr. McQueen is certainly committed to Tennessee students, but she is no magician. She knows, and you know, that if the state was willing to adequately fund our schools, they would have done so long ago. So if the leadership and other board members of this board choose to sidestep their obligation to our students and taxpayers by not joining the other districts in their pursuit of full funding of BEP 2.0, then everyone in Nashville, including parents, citizens, council members, and students alike, will know exactly where you stand, and it is not on our side. It is painful to watch the utter dysfunction and lack of leadership on this board. To have our chair, in her absence, use another board member to chastise a fellow board member, it's laughable. To then realize that the chair orchestrated a cheering section in the audience when the vice chair treated that like they were her personal fan base, where you almost expected her to stand up and take a bow, since she clearly had no interest in maintaining decorum of the meeting. Well, that kind of behavior is what I would expect from a middle school student, not from a room of professionals and elected officials. So as a parent and tax-paying citizen that's invested in our schools, I am asking you to stop the nonsense. Stop wasting our time and resources with petty digs and power plays, and for the love of all that's holy, please stop rolling your eyes when your colleagues are speaking, and stop winking at your buddy when you think someone got in a good dig at Will Pinkston. You are on camera, so act accordingly. No one expects you to all be friends. We don't even expect you to get along, but we do expect you to do your job, and that's to put the students and their schools first. They deserve nothing less than your full attention to making sure they are supported with a quality director at the helm and full funding, so stop dragging your feet and make it happen. It is what you're elected to do, not to sit around this table and one-up each other. Nashville has had quite enough of that.
Chris Moth.
Good evening. I'm Chris Moth. I'm a parent of 3 students in MNPS. In 1999, this board implemented an automatic pathway from Meigs to Hume-Fogg. I'm afraid focus on academic achievement at zone middle schools was reduced, and today, while we have an excellent strategic plan, our middle schools are overall weakest in academic achievement. Neighborhood schools are losing support of our taxpayers and state leaders, who increasingly demand that we open more charter schools. 18 more await your approval. As we look back on the last decade or so, I sense that every time you open a charter school over here, another zone school over there descends into the bottom 5%. And while we play whack-a-mole with our kids in Davidson County, Williamson County implements a steadfast commitment to educate all its children, wherever they are found. Average schools are higher in Williamson, and our state leaders have exempted them from their most punitive policies. Charter schools are supposed to be incubators of new ideas, laboratories where visionaries can roll up their sleeves and show us all how to improve. I've toured KIPP and Valor. The energy and focus of Randy Dowell and Todd Dixon is indeed infectious. Last October, I attended part of a board meeting of Republic Charters. Ravi Gupta runs a meeting like clockwork. Every board member is professional in their demeanor and in their speech with one another. They are not bashful about fundraising either. Our charter school boards understand that all our public funding is inadequate, and at Republic Charters, they in fact ask each board member to recruit warm prospects who can make contributions of at least $5,000. I also attended part of a meeting of Valor's board, where I heard discussion on academic achievement. Like all of us, Valor is impeded by Tennessee's waffling on Common Core and the obsolescence of TCAP. But instead of waiting for Tennessee, Valor is benchmarking against sets of high-performing charters in Colorado and MAP assessments. The troubling thing about these charter board meetings is that none of you were there. You are opening these schools to learn, but if you don't sit in on the board meetings, how can you learn their lessons and bring them back to MNPS? You need to ask yourselves if your meetings can be as well-oiled as Ravi Gupta's. You need to face the high scores at Valor and the wait list there. Are these results entirely due to Todd Dixon's vision and energy, or does part of Valor's success stem from not serving children from our public housing projects? In the way of all our schools stands a visionless state government that deplores our policies and administration. They have demanded that you open bad charter schools. They fined you. They've refused health care for vulnerable working families in our system. And every time they take a breather from gun laws, they change academic standards. I hope you agree that Tennessee needs a wake-up call. I can't imagine how your relationship with our state leaders could get any worse, and so I don't think you have much to lose. I hope you'll explore joining other cities in the lawsuit for BEP 2.0 funds. And finally, please stop opening more charter schools unless you, too, are willing to learn from the ones that you've already opened. Thanks much.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Lynn Hoyt, John Bennett, Anne Marie Farmer.
That's right.
Followed by Lynn Hoyt, John Bennett, Lindsley Long, and Jay Sanders.
Ready?
Yes, sorry.
Hi, I'm Anne Marie Farmer. I was here last month. I am an attorney and mother of 2 children at Glendale Elementary School, and I'm here also to talk about funding issues. I want to start off by saying how much I appreciate the work Metro Schools does. I'm an alumna of Metro, and my mother taught in this district for over 20 years. Metro Schools change lives for the better every day and do tremendous work under often difficult circumstances. I'm proud to be a Metro Schools parent, and I am confident in the education my 2 boys will receive all the way through high school in this district. However, as we know, Metro is limited by insufficient funding. Everyone here is aware of important services and programs that could be offered to our children if more funds were available. Year after year, our state ranks 48th or 49th in school funding. This has been the case for far too long. And it's not just a matter of the funding formula. Since the state created the BEP 2.0 formula in 2007, it has failed to fund schools according to that formula for even one of the years since it was adopted. In fact, instead of moving toward fully funding BEP 2.0, our state's current administration is pursuing voucher proposals that will further cut Metro's operating budget. So where does that leave us? The other large urban districts, members of the Coalition of Large Area School Systems, have joined in an effort to prepare a legal challenge on school funding, if necessary. The word lawsuit seems to scare a lot of people, and folks throw in words like protracted, litigation, costly, litigious, to make it seem as though a legal challenge is always an onerous mistake. In fact, lawsuits are not always drawn out, excessively costly affairs. We live in a nation of laws, and when people disagree about their legal obligations, they ask courts to resolve the disagreement. In recent years, the state of Tennessee has fallen short in its obligations to children in both the Department of Children's Services and in TennCare. The state has made significant improvements in these areas in response to, you guessed it, lawsuits, brought by those demanding that the state fulfill its obligations. The following language is from the website of the Tennessee Justice Center, who brought some of these suits. Quote, if state officials were willing to be accountable, they would hasten to fix the problems. But instead, they refuse to be accountable or fulfill their responsibilities. That has left tens of thousands of vulnerable Tennesseans with only one refuge, the courts. Close quote. Where there is injustice, the courts have been a place to right wrongs. The underfunding of our schools is an injustice. If the state of Tennessee does not move quickly to address this injustice, please don't be afraid to go to court and demand that this wrong be righted. If Metro doesn't participate in this effort, it looks like it will be the only large district in the state to wait and, to use the words of Commissioner McQueen to the Nashville scene, see how history plays out on this particular topic. My prediction is that history will play out the same way it has for far, far too long in Tennessee, with abysmally low school funding and the state having no reason to change that until it's forced to do so.
can go ahead. Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Lynn Hoyt. I am currently Vice President of the MEGS PTO, and I speak to you tonight from the perspective of a PTO board member. I have 3 children in MNPS. MNPS is working well for us. My 8th grade son just scored well enough on his pre-SAT, or ACT, that by your measure, he is ready for college. But we all know that is not the case. He still has 4 more years to grow personally and academically. And as a parent, I want that 4 years to be implemented with quality. Our higher standards are improving those oh-so-coveted measurable test scores, yet our legislature seems to be doing everything in their power to add on more unfunded mandates that peel away instructional time and divert funding to private entities that drive students out of the public system. Our basic education plan is not fully funded. We have a formula created by our state, and it's time that we ask our state government to stop ignoring that formula. My children attend 2 different MNPS schools right now, one zone, one magnet. Both our PTOs currently raise, on average, around $50,000 a year. PTO money is being used for buying professional tutors for our most behind and at risk. We have bought instructional support material, supplies, musical instruments, art materials, books, teacher training, school nurse time. We have clothing closet. We have funded field trips, rides to activities, and most recently, testing programs to generate data to satisfy state and district data mandates. We have even been asked to provide curriculum for social studies. Why would a PTO be asked to fund these things if funding was not a problem? My PTO board said no to the social studies curriculum, believing it was overstepping the responsibility of the PTO funding, and I think MNPS came through on that. But that is how desperate our school has become to maintain a high quality. Maybe that $50,000 is the difference between a school in good standing and one on the priority list. Those schools without PTOs must survive on whatever the district gives them. This adds to the performance gap, the opportunity gap, the funding gap. We are begging for crumbs, and we are drowning to keep quality high enough to keep engaged families in the system. I'm asking this board to vote for quality by engaging the state, because quality is what every child in this district deserves. Response intervention could be implemented with fidelity to reach engage all kids with the extra supports and enrichments they need. 60 kids in my son's enrichment class is not quality. Instructional supports are spread too thin with response to intervention. Imagine what extra BEP funding could do to help improve that implementation. A lawsuit seems to be the only way our legislature will listen. Don't sit on your hands. Vote to investigate legal strategies. A multi-county lawsuit is a shared cost. Please demand that our state fully fund BEP. My biggest fear is that our city council will look at a refusal to pursue BEP as a sign we really don't need additional funding. And I hope that's not the case. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Bennett. I am a parent of a McGavick student and also a business professional here in Nashville, and I appreciate your time very much this evening. I've served as the last few years as a liaison for the Donaldson Hermitage Chamber of Commerce with McGavick High School in particular, and I've witnessed a transformation of that high school. I will tell you, 5 years ago, I would have fought to keep my daughter from going to that high school because of the academic standards, because of the disciplinary problems, different situations that I had heard of and seen at that school. However, through the leadership of Robin Wall, the executive principal, the support of School Board Representative Anna Shepard, and also our current superintendent of schools, Dr. Register, it has been a dramatic change in a very, very positive way. I'm glad to say that we now have the 5 academy pathways that have been established, and I've seen a lot of community partnerships with local businesses, churches, other organizations that have been solidified to enhance the academic life and overall life experiences of students at McGavick. I've also, as a business professional, seen a positive effect on property values in the Donaldson Hermitage Old Hickory area, as well as businesses relocating to that area in a quicker fashion, which is certainly a welcome change. And basically, my reason to stand up and talk tonight is just to ask that as we consider, and board, as you consider this new superintendent of schools, that you be informed and make sure that the new superintendent is informed of the positive advancements that have happened at McGavick. I think over the last 5 years it's been tremendous, and I certainly, as a parent and a business leader, would hate to see it go back any at all. Certainly want to see the new superintendent of schools to have at the same or even greater level of passion for backing what we're doing in that area. And it's been wonderful to see businesses and community organizations, churches, et cetera, all come together to fight for the same cause, because we were tired of spending our tax dollars for a school that was completely deficient in most all areas. So it's proven that it can be done. It's light years better than it was. I'm actually proud to have a student at that school today, and I want to make sure that it doesn't go backwards, but it continues to go forward. Thank you very much.
May I begin? Hi, my name is Lindsley Long. I'm a Nashville native, and I attended Hillsborough High School way back when. I graduated in, well, not way back when to some of you. I graduated in '94. Oh, that wasn't meant as a dig. Anyway, well, I just wanted to say that I'm going to keep my comments brief. I have 3 children, 2 of whom are in Nashville Public Schools. One is at Moore and one is at Glendale, and another going to Glendale on the way. And I want to say that I think that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And I don't think, while we have made some strides since I graduated from Hillsborough, I don't think enough change has happened. So, and I'm afraid that without the threat of litigation, nothing will change. So I want to encourage you all to not be opposed to entering into litigation if necessary. Roosevelt said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." I think we have a stick, and we need to show them that we mean business and we're prepared to use it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Dr. Register, and board members. Knox County, unanimously in favor. Shelby County, unanimously in favor. Hamilton County, 8-1 in favor. Several small districts in favor. Metro Council on board. These are just some of the Tennesseans ready to push the state into action about funding our schools. Let's show our neighbors that we will do our part to be leaders in children for Tennessee. Recently, I participated in K-12 Action Planning Retreat and was surrounded by incredibly talented educators and affiliates looking at every angle to make sure that MNPS becomes an education leader and innovator in this state and in the nation. These creative educators can get us to that goal, but if the state fails to fund their part, it's going to be a long time coming before we become that leader. Surely, as one of America's 62 districts of distinction, we will vote unanimously to move forward with the statewide effort to make sure that BEP is funded fully and equitably. If you're taking Dr. Register's lead, please reconsider. Vote yes in the effort to pressure, and if necessary, sue the state of Tennessee in order to get the funding we need to reach our goals. On a separate note, I am asking that each board representative remember that you are a representative of all the people in your district, and to do this effectively, you must communicate with us. Don't wait for us to come to you. Go and visit the schools, go to community centers, churches, see what we see, learn what we expect from you. I believe a more robust PAC or a modified East Nashville Advisory Task Force could bring new voices to the table. MNPS has embraced social media and it's blossomed. But considering what NOAA told us about a large percentage of Nashvillians, and considering that MNPS must dispense information to people who speak more than 140 languages, we must find creative ways to communicate with all of our families, not just those who use technology and traditional media. Things would have been completely different last semester if MNPS had solicited feedback before proposals were announced in East Nashville. If MNPS and our school board representative had engaged the parents of East Nashville over the past few years, the proposed changes wouldn't have become such a shock when they were announced. We have to dialogue to make this work. MNPS and the board have to find ways to communicate with our communities consistently and honestly. Thank you.
Hi there, board members, Dr. Register, good to see you all tonight. My name is Austin McMullen. I reside at 955 Greerland Drive in Nashville. I am the father of a third grade MNPS student, and I'll have a kindergartner in MNPS next year. School funding is an important issue to me, as I'm sure it is for everyone in this room. But I also realize the importance of using our funds wisely and working cooperatively. Litigation would not be a useful approach for increasing funding, certainly not at this time. I'm a lawyer, and I would suggest that the lawyers are the ones who are most likely to benefit from intergovernmental litigation of this sort. Resources are, unfortunately, limited at all levels of government, but a lawsuit will not inject more money into the system. Instead, it will drain funds away. Rather than enrich the lawyers, please use MNPS's dollars for the students, as you have been working to do, and I'm sure you will continue to do. I would encourage you to at least meet with and talk with the new Commissioner of Education for the state of Tennessee and Governor Haslam about this important issue to get their perspective and to see what options are available. Litigation should only be used as the very last resort. Have all the options for increasing funding been exhausted? I don't think they have at this point. Please continue your advocacy for students, but pursue cooperative approaches first when dealing with other governmental units. Thank you for the work that you do for our students. I know that it's underappreciated, but I do appreciate it. Thank you for the work you do for them and for our community, and thank you for considering my input.
Okay, Christine Vitt, Faye Taylor, John.
Dorsch.
Yes, Dorsch, Mary Hart, and Lee Jack.
Well, thank you, and good evening. My name is Christine Vitt, and I'm here today as the chair of the McGavitt Cluster Coalition. And maybe a little good news for you guys. I'm speaking for the next 4 people on the list, so you'll get about 10 minutes back. So, Madam Chair and members of the board, the McGavitt Cluster Coalition is a group of community and local business volunteers who formally organized in April 2013 for the sole purpose of supporting the schools within the McGavitt Cluster. The mission of the MCC for short is to increase the percentage of McGavitt High School students graduating with the skills necessary to be successful in post-secondary education while establishing the Donaldson Hermitage area as a community of choice for businesses and residents in pursuit of academic excellence. On behalf of the MCC, we echo our partners, the Donaldson Hermitage Chamber, who you'll hear from in a second, and we also stand together with Anna Shepard from District 4 in support of the Academies of Nashville educational model. The MCC and the McGavitt Academies are prime examples of how the local community can become engaged and provide positive support for our students. For example, the MCC helps coordinate and participates in annual events at the McGavitt High School, including, and the list is long, but freshman orientation, first day event, promise to graduate ceremony, professional skills fair, FAFSA drive, job shadow days, scholarship awards ceremony, last day event, and graduation. Each of these events draws from the local community, and the students enjoy having those outside faculty participate in the events. This is a greater sense of purpose when the community shows that they care. Most notable, however, is the contribution from the McGavick Covenant, which is the scholarship fundraising branch of the MCC. For the first time ever in 2014, 44 graduating students were awarded scholarships totaling $22,000 to assist in paying for college books and supplies. All of these dollars were raised from local businesses and McGavick supporters within the community. We anticipate this number to be even higher in 2015. We ask you, therefore, to continue down the path with the Academies of Nashville and to find a director who will foster these programs and appreciate the community engagement and monetary support that they have spurred for our students to date. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Leah Jack. I'm the Executive Director of the Donaldson Hermitage Chamber of Commerce, and I have a letter here from my Board of Directors which will be sent to you via mail and email. Dear Chairperson Gentry, Dr. Register, and board members, we, the undersigned Donaldson Hermitage Chamber of Commerce board members, respectfully request that the Metropolitan Nashville Board of Public Education continue to support the Academies of Nashville educational model as you search for a new director of schools. We stand together in support of District 4 School Board Representative Anna Shepard in sustaining this model of education, as we have seen significant benefit to students and teachers as well as business and community partners. Since 2008-2009, we have seen drastic improvements at McGavick High School due in large part to the academy process that allows business professionals and leaders to engage in the educational process. Our local business owners and community partners have shown up on the first and last day of school to greet students. We have assisted with Professional Skills Fair Day for Freshman Academy. 650, I might add. That was quite a feat. We've offered business tours for sophomores, invited students to job shadow as juniors, and we've even provided mentorship opportunities in helping seniors with capstone projects. The Academy model allows this business and community participation in a way that enhances the learning experience for students, assists teachers with rich and meaningful resources both financially and experientially, and provides a means for companies that both large and small to give back in a way that is both meaningful and productive. This foundation is the best springboard for higher education and ultimately job placement in our own community. The proper ingredients are in play to continue success with the Academy model: strong leadership in our cluster lead principals, caring and engaged Metro School Board representatives, community partners like local chambers of commerce, and a multitude of local business partners, teachers willing to open their classrooms to engage experiential learning, and the excitement of students who see that these adults are genuinely concerned for their well-being and success. And all this is made possible by the direction of the Metropolitan Nashville Board of Public Education and the leadership of our Director of Schools. We ask you, therefore, to consider carefully these points as you search for a Director of Schools who will grow the Academy model in Metropolitan Nashville. We concur that changing course away from this path would eliminate the momentum we are seeing in student improvements and would be detrimental to continued support from business and community partners. We urge you to stay the course with the Academies of Nashville educational model. Sincerely, the Donaldson Hermitage Chamber Board of Directors. Thank you.
Moving into governance issues, the consent agenda. Are there any changes?
I just want to pull one item for additional discussion, which is item 1G6, Hazard Young Atia Associates.
And Ms. Frobe?
Can I also pull item 1I?
1I.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
A, approval of minutes, 10/14/2014 and 10/28/2014 regular meetings. B, recommended approval of contract for lead consultation at various schools, Hastings Architecture Associates, LLC. C, recommended approval of contract for architectural services for Bordeaux Early Learning Center additions and demolition of front building, DKRS Architects Engineers, PLLC. D, recommended approval of change order number 2 for McGavock High School Fire Safety Upgrades, Carrie G. Campbell Incorporated. E, recommended approval of request number 12 for asbestos abatement services, Bordeaux Early Learning Center, Levy Industrial Contractors Incorporated. F, site acquisition of former Lowe's building at 4531 Nolensville Road for the new Overton Cluster Elementary School. G, awarding of purchases and contracts. A, Amaranth Designs LLC. 2, the Curb Event at Belmont University. 3, Dell Financial Services LLC. 4, East Penn Manufacturing Company. 5, the Google Fiber Company. 7, Safe Source Limited. 8, ThyssenKrupp Elevator Americas. H, recommended approval of lease agreement for Brick Church College Prep Charter School's use of the Brick Church Middle School building. J, recommended approval of request for compulsory attendance waiver. K, recommended approval of textbook adoption for hospitality marketing, hospitality and tourism management program, HTMP, year 1 and year 2.
Is there a motion to approve?
Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Motion made by Ms. Shepherd. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Brandon. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Pinkston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick point of clarification around the Hazard Young Attia and Associates contract. This proposed contract, of course, is the search firm that will help us identify and hire the next director of schools. The early draft of the contract that I saw had contemplated the search concluding by September 30th, which was not consistent with what was in the firm's proposal, which was more in the July timeframe. And can we just clarify before this contract gets executed what the contemplated conclusion date would be, or by anyway?
It's been changed to July 1, which is the copy that was sent to all board members.
Great. I haven't seen it, but thank you. That's all I had. I just wanted to clarify.
Can we get approval of the contract for Hazard Young and Attia? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Frobe.
The lease for Cameron College Prep Charter, Cameron is a conversion school, and I understood that we were not charging rent for the conversion schools which were not fully converted, but it appears from this lease agreement that we are in fact charging rent to Cameron Prep.
Converted as of the end of this year.
Cameron will be as well?
Cameron already is.
Cameron is fully converted?
Correct, and so we
Okay.
are charging rent.
Okay, and then Brick Church is already will be fully converted next year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Why do we not charge rent to charter schools that are not fully converted? Why are they not paying their fair share year to year?
I honestly cannot answer that.
Okay. Can anyone answer it?
That would be an administration decision, but we are charging for fully converted charters. We are charging at a lesser rate because they are students that are our own children, like are in Cameron. So we charge them a rate to cover our expenses, all of our utilities and all the things we're providing there. But they're not charged presently until it's fully converted.
Why are we not charging them year to year until they're fully converted?
So we have not prorated that. I guess Cameron set the precedent for that because Cameron Lead Academy applied at our request years ago to participate in a transition there. We occupied the building and they started a grade at the time, and so now with full conversion, we're making that, we're charging that rent. With the Achievement School District operates Brick Church Middle, and I will defer to, Alan, I'm going to ask you to speak to the state Achievement School District approach to taking buildings.
They do not allow rent per se, but they do allow charging for utilities and services and costs at the school, which we will do.
The ASD does not allow us to charge rent?
Right.
Okay.
The law.
Okay. What about the conversions that we authorize?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that we did that was because we were starting up that process from scratch, and it was part of the ability to attract and help to support the development of an organization that could do that work well.
Can we change that policy in the future so that it's fair to everyone? Because we're double paying them. They get the full per pupil amount, but they're not paying any rent. And then we also are offering them several other services. If you guys could list what those are, I think those are transportation and food, and what other services we're providing them for free? Some administrative costs?
Well, I don't believe we're providing them transportation for free. Is that correct, Mr. Carr?
We are during the conversion.
Not at Brick Church, though, beginning this year, correct?
Once it's fully converted, we're not.
Okay.
What about for charter schools in general? What free services are we providing them?
In general, we don't provide free services.
Can Mr. Henson answer the question? Aren't we providing some services for no cost to them, such as administrative services?
Yeah, I think this is the same discussion we've had previously, where the district does have some administrative services that are being provided on behalf of charter schools that were outlined in both the MGT report as well as the performance audit report, that the district has not yet formulated the best way to actually charge those and include those charges in the charter agreement, which would be a requirement, and it would be something that would have to be agreed to by the charter organization. It couldn't be unilaterally added into the charter agreement by the district.
Okay, can we have a discussion of this in the future, that we make it fair so they're not getting double paid? That's all.
So going back to item I, can I get a motion?
I move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Froh, Mr. Pinkston, and Ms. Shepherd. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So I just want to go back, Ms. Froh, so that the conversation is productive. So I think Mr. Henson referenced it when I asked the question, can we define what's in the 9,000, et cetera, right? And breaking it down. That conversation is not going to be productive until we can break it down, right? So I think what you're asking makes perfect sense, because if we can define the dollar value of the administrative services that we provide, then there's an argument for a charge. But we are unable to define that as of yet. So I think I just want you to be prepared that in that discussion, until we can get past can you figure out what it is? We can all be in favor of charging it, but we don't know what it is. Okay. So that's where the challenge has been. So I don't know how we get past that, but it's a fair question.
Okay.
Item number 2, BEP adequacy funding. Ms. Shepherd.
I would ask that Mr. Robert Gowan and Ms. Elizabeth Millsaps come to address the board on this topic, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Register. I'm Robert Gowan. Elizabeth Millsaps and I represent the group known as CLASS, which is a coalition of large school systems. That includes, as you know, Knox County, Hamilton County, Shelby County, and Metro. Wanted to talk tonight about the discussion that CLASS has been having. The latest iteration of this discussion started last November. The CLASS organization generally meets twice a year. We were snowed out a couple of weeks ago for our winter meeting. But CLASS did have its annual meeting where we usually just discuss the upcoming legislative session, but at the and first thing I want to say, I think there's been a lot of confusion about exactly what other CLASS districts have done and not done with this issue. And as I started there, I'd like to give a brief history of the most recent events that have led to this discussion tonight. And I say the most recent events because this issue is the reason CLASS got together. CLASS was formed in 2006 over concerns about the adequacy of the BEP formula. At that time, the small school suit, the last Supreme Court opinion had been issued in 2002. That suit was dismissed, I think, in early 2006. But the formula had been in place, and at that time, it had been in place for over 10 years at the time. And there was a feeling, especially at the time, among the big four mayors, that the big four counties were not getting their fair share of the BEP. So this discussion is actually what brought class together in 2006. But at our November 16th class meeting, which was our annual meeting, class met and discussed funding issues in general, as we do every year. There are over a dozen unfunded or underfunded items that are identified each year by the BEP Review Committee. And that the BEP Review Committee provide an annual report to the General Assembly every November on the state of education funding, essentially. But at the meeting in November, we focused on two issues that the BEP Review Committee has consistently identified as issues that are, I guess, they are items that have not been fully funded in the BEP. The first one and the biggest ticket item is the salary component in the BEP. The BEP currently provides about $40,000 in the salary component. Salary component is one of 45 components that goes into the BEP to determine how much money is generated from the BEP. The BEP only includes $40,000. The average teacher salary, the BEP Review Committee has pointed out for several years, is more than $10,000, that amount. So teachers in Tennessee on average get paid $50,000. Every other component of the BEP, actual costs that school districts incur are considered. The department actually looks back 3 years at what districts have spent, and then the BEP is adjusted to reflect those actual costs. Every component of the 45 components except the salary. This issue and the health insurance issue, which is a smaller issue, currently the BEP only includes 10 months of health insurance when they calculate on average how much it costs districts to provide health insurance. You pay for 12 months. So there's a $65 million shortfall in what should be included in the BEP if you are going to recognize what it actually costs to provide health insurance. But those were the two issues that we focused on at the November 16th meeting. And at that meeting, some other districts, mainly Hamilton County and Knox County, shared their experience that they had consistently gone back to their county commission for additional funding, but the response was, you need to get the state to provide the funding that we were supposed to get out of BEP 2.0. That led to a discussion at that meeting of whether we need to consider suing the state. So that was November 16th. At the end of that discussion in November, we were asked to contact the Education Law Center, which is a nonprofit think tank that has been involved with most of the adequate funding litigation that's been filed around the country in the last 20 years, for their advice and their perspective. We're also asked to contact other Tennessee stakeholders, including the Small Schools Association. And that was to start gathering information for consideration of pursuing an adequate funding lawsuit. And one thing that I should have said at the beginning, the conversation within class has always been that litigation would be a last resort, up to and until right now. We agree with what Dr. Register said yesterday and what Mayor McMullen said in his public comments earlier. It should be a last resort. But we did meet, several stakeholder groups met with the Education Law Center a month later on December 16th. The small schools were represented, the Urban League was represented, TEA, Tennessee Education Association, Tennessee School Boards Association, Elizabeth and I, some other members of class, both administration and board members. Also at that meeting were an attorney from Hamilton County who has been looking into this issue before this discussion even started with class. And an attorney that has represented Metro in the past, John Borkowski, also attended that meeting. At that December meeting, the Education Law Center helped us in understanding what was going on with other states. adequate funding litigation. And there are several pending cases, most notable that are pending right now that I'm aware of. South Carolina, Texas, and Kansas have active adequate funding litigation that is related to adequacy. But they gave us an overview of that. They also gave us an overview of where Tennessee stands as compared to other states in funding in general. At the end of the meeting with the Education Law Center, we asked, just as a practical matter, how did those states who are litigating, how did they come together to litigate? And the suggestion was made to do like those states that did choose to litigate, and actually some other states that have chosen not to litigate. The suggestion was draft a complaint so that school board members, if school boards are going to bring the complaint, draft a complaint so that school board members can see that a long time before you file litigation, but so you can see what the argument would be. And so you could see exactly what the arguments would be, and you could decide for yourself how strong or how weak the argument for additional funds might be. So that was the suggestion that came from the meeting with the Education Law Center. And I want to stop right here and talk about how class is managed, I will say, on a day-to-day basis. As I said, class meets with the entire membership is invited to at least two meetings a year. But there's a class working group. It's part of your bylaws. There's a class working group that includes the director or representative of the director and a board member. Each of the 4 districts have a member in those positions in the class working group. So we took this recommendation to the class working group and had conversations about how to follow the recommendation of drafting a complaint, just to give the 4 boards the information that they needed to make a decision. And since John Borkowski had already done some research on the funding issues for Metro, the class working group recommended and directed us to ask Mr. Borkowski to put together a proposal for an initial engagement that would involve drafting a complaint for school boards to review as they considered whether or not to litigate. That proposal was shared with each of the 4 class districts on January 23rd. I sent you all a memo last week with the resolutions, the language from the resolutions that each of the other class districts have approved in response to the Borkowski memo. I've got the language here. I can go through that if you'd like, but we did share that with you, exactly what Knox County's done, what Hamilton County's done, and what Shelby County voted to do a couple of weeks ago. None of the districts that have considered this voted to litigate. They voted to, the most specific resolution that came out of any of the districts, Shelby County directed their superintendent within 30 days to start the process to begin hiring an attorney who could give them advice and potentially draft a complaint that would give the board the information that they needed to move forward one way or the other. I think it's obvious you would have to vote again if you wanted to litigate, and that's not something that the class districts, we've been having just this conversation since November. So what is that, 5 months? It's taken us 5 months to get to this point. I don't think there's any possibility that the class districts are going to be in court anytime soon. But I just wanted to give you that background, and I'm glad to try to answer any questions that the board has.
Thank you, Mr. Gowan. Any questions? Start on this end, Dr. Brannon.
When you mentioned the states that have already started the process, the actual litigation process,
yes.
Have any of those states been successful, or are they all pending?
It depends on how you, there have been court decisions, I think, in all 3 of those that were favorable toward the school districts who brought the litigation. It is now, I don't have the most recent information because these things are moving because legislatures are in session considering what their Supreme Courts have done. But I know in all three of those, the court came back with a decision that was going to have to be considered by their legislature. I mean, it will be up to the legislature to decide how to handle that, and that's the way it's been in Tennessee as well.
One other question. The $100 million that was just allocated for teacher salary, did you say that would be part of the BEP 2.0?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure, and Chris Henson may want to speak to this. I'm not sure how that's going to be treated. I assume that it will be applied to that teacher salary component, which we said was about $40,000. And according to my calculation, if you divide that $100 million by the number of teachers in Tennessee, it would be about a $1,600 increase in that $40,000 number. So you would move up, but you would not reach the $50,000 average teacher pay.
Ms. Shepherd?
So are we on any type of time constraints when to make a decision? Any kind of time constraints on when we need to make our decision?
I would say no, but I would also say that your counterparts are meeting. I know Shelby County has a meeting tomorrow to actually discuss hiring an attorney. There have been some reports that they have already hired an attorney. They have not. But they are having another meeting tomorrow night specifically to discuss hiring an attorney. But there's no timeline for when you have to do something.
So if they hire an attorney, they're just acting on their own. They're not acting as a class organization, correct?
I'm not sure if that's true or not. I mean, they're not acting on behalf of class. Right. They are not acting on behalf of class. Okay. You're correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Kim? Mr. Pinks?
And I need to clarify, I don't know if they're going to, I would be surprised if they have a proposal from an attorney. I think the meeting tomorrow night is to give an update on where they are because they did have a 30-day, their director did have a 30-day deadline to start the process.
Come back to me, please.
You want to like wrap it up with a whammy. Ms. Spears?
Are you not going?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking.
After
Okay.
you.
All right. Well, I do have some questions. First of all, I definitely want to state that I am fully in support of advocating to our state for fully funding the BEP and the adequate funding. And I've, been reading the emails, and Mr. Pinkston brought up yesterday about the resolution that this board passed last December 2013, that Ms. Frog had read. And the last few lines jumped out at me that said, "Now therefore be it resolved, the board hereby invites other member districts of the Coalition of Large School Systems class to collaboratively initiate discussions with the Tennessee Department of Education and the Governor's Office regarding adequate school funding." So what I had assumed would be coming from those last three sentences there is that there would have been proactive initiations with the school board members, with class, with you guys as the representation, with the Governor's Office. And even in your account tonight, I've not heard that those meetings happen. I've heard about meetings with attorneys and other class members and that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just read an email that I sent this morning to Mark Cate in the Governor's Office. I said, "As you know, the MNPS Board of Education will vote tonight on whether or not to join Knox, Shelby, and Hamilton counties in exploring filing a legal complaint against the state for not fully funding the BEP. Just as of yesterday, one of my fellow board members pointed out that in December 2013, the 4 districts filed a resolution asking the state to fully fund the BEP because they wanted the districts to collectively work together with the governor and address concerns via conversations before considering legal action. I knew about the resolution, but had not remembered the commitment to converse first. I've not seen any reports, memos, recaps of the outcomes of these conversations, which I would assume happen between your office and school board reps from the 4 districts, and/or at least through the class lobbyists over the past year? Can you please confirm that such meetings and conversations actually took place, or if they were requested and denied by your office? I have seen the BEP task force report issued last month, and I'm interested in discussing some considerations. And Mark Kate wrote back and said, thanks for your message. We've had no official communication from class regarding funding issues. In fact, we've heard a lot of conversation was taking place about the possibility of a lawsuit, but the only official communication came from Robert Gowan this past Saturday, when he alerted us to the fact that MNPS would be the last body to take an official vote. And he forwarded that communication, and it's very lengthy, it's very detailed, but it is also very clear it's a starting point. So I think my question to you is, when we say in a resolution that we're going to engage the state to try to find strategies so that litigation can be a last resort, because I'm trying to be extremely thoughtful about this, and I really am. And if all those steps have been taken, you know, then maybe it's time to pursue the legal route. But I'm not seeing evidence that that's happened.
If I could respond, you're correct. I mean, there's not been an official request for a meeting, but we have participated in what we saw as the governor's response to the 2013 resolution, which was the BEP task force. We were admonished at every meeting that we're not here to talk about adequacy, including the last meeting.
But they invited you to speak in October. They invited you to present on behalf of class.
Yes, and we did.
Okay.
But we were admonished not to, the purpose of that was not to talk about adequacy. The message has been clear to us that this is not, I mean, it's not the time that they want to talk about adequacy.
But, I mean, did anyone hear? I mean, I've only been on the board 6 months, but I don't recall being asked, you know, to say, you know, we're really trying to avoid litigation. But I was at the November meeting, and I was on the conference call, and it was very much down the path that, I mean, people are pretty fired up, like, let's go sue. So I'm just trying to make sure that we really have taken the steps that we say we've taken so that we can answer to our constituents and say, in good faith, we have absolutely pursued the collaborative route first. And I even got a call last night from Ronnie Stein because of the call that's been going out that no one knows who funded it and sponsored it, that puts you in touch with the school board member, which is a slanted message of saying that, you know, to pursue the lawsuit. And he even said that, yes, his name is on that letter, but, I mean, he's not supportive of this route. It was a little misleading how he was asked to sign. So I think other people are starting to notice and ask those questions too, to say, give us evidence that you've really pursued this in good faith.
If I could, I mean, one thing I would say, I've been told since 2005 that the 2 issues that I've described are problems. As I stand here tonight, I don't know how strong your case is. I would like to have the same advice that the other class districts have asked to receive.
I guess I'm just trying to say, walk me through what happened after December 13th. I mean, after December 2013, in terms of the initiation of the conversation. I mean, maybe fellow board members here can help me.
Can we hear from Mr. Henson on this, who was a member of the governor's BEP task force?
No, but it says in here that the board was going to invite the other districts to do this. So I would take that as even my responsibility to make sure that I've done what I can do to, in good faith, say I'm avoiding litigation at all costs.
I am summarizing what I think everybody thought at the time, but when the governor created a BEP task force and appointed Mr. Henson to it, that was a different condition, a set of conditions than existed at the time that resolution was passed. I think people, not speaking for anybody else, but I think in general people were interested to see how that process goes. Hopefully it'll go well. and it did not really yield anything useful. So just because, that was their response, the governor's office, to these resolutions that were passing all around the state. So people said, hey, let's be reasonable and participate in that process and see how that goes. So that's what happened at that time, if that's what you're asking.
Thank you. Oh, are you done?
I think so.
I've got comments. I can just go ahead and.
Yeah.
I think they address. Okay. Yeah, and they address, I think, some of the things Mary was saying. And I apologize for the length. I was going to wait for a motion, but I'm going to launch right into it. So first of all, I want to put the discussion of adequate school funding into full perspective. The BEP, which is the formula to fund our schools, was born of a lawsuit and otherwise would not exist. Although the BEP was put into place back in 1992, it has never been fully funded. An updated version of the BEP called BEP 2.0 was approved in 2007. Again, it has never been fully funded. Consequently, Tennessee always scrapes the bottom of the barrel on school funding. We usually rank around 49th in the nation for education spending, yet we have some of the highest mandated standards in the country. The state created a BEP review committee to review the formula yearly and to make recommendations to the state regarding school funding. Our own Chris Hinton serves on that committee, as we've mentioned. This committee's recommendations are regularly ignored by the state, even though the state put the committee in place to help make the best decisions on behalf of our schools. If the state were to fully fund the BEP 2.0 as it was approved in 2007, MNPS would receive an additional $14 million per year. If the state were to fully fund all of the recommendations of its own committee, MNPS would receive an additional $73 million per year. The four largest school districts together would receive an additional $315 million per year, and schools statewide would receive an additional $1 billion plus per year. We invest in what we value. So I think the answer to Mary's question is that the discussions at the governor's BEP task force have made it clear that not only is there no plan by the Haslam administration to address funding inadequacies, there is a plan not to address funding inadequacies. So one argument I've heard about against, and by the way, they are well aware of the inadequacies. They've never funded it. They have a review committee that they ignore. One argument I've heard against pursuing litigation is that we don't have an appetite for a lawsuit. I have three responses to this argument. Number one, we are not voting to file a lawsuit tomorrow. We will be voting to explore our options with qualified, independent legal counsel. I think we all agree that we don't need to rush into a lawsuit, but at the very least, we should thoughtfully consider our options with competent legal advice. To me, this is a no-brainer. We are voting on whether we want to be informed as a board. Being part of the class coalition's effort to seek legal advice does not preclude us from continuing to engage in dialogue with the state. My second response, back in 2012, Commissioner Huffman withheld $3.4 million from our students after this board refused to approve a charter school on the grounds of diversity concerns. Huffman illegally withheld the $3.4 million for political purposes with no right whatsoever to do so. And worse, he withheld the money only from students in traditional schools. He protected all MNPS charter schools from this fine. What Commissioner Huffman did should have been a crime. At that time, this board was advised not to sue on the grounds that it would impede our relationship with the state. Since then, a few fellow board members have told me they regret the decision not to move forward with a lawsuit in 2012. We are in the exact same position now with no discernible improvement in our relationship with the state, and I urge my fellow board members to remember 2012. My third response. Although some claim that we don't have an appetite for a lawsuit, this rule does not seem to apply in other situations involving legal disputes. The MNPS administration is appealing a ruling favoring the SEIU in their MOU case, despite reservations by some board members that this might be a waste of effort and resources. There seems to be no fear of litigation in that case. This week, Dr. Register stated his opposition to a lawsuit. This is an about-face from earlier positions he has taken. In fact, he instigated this discussion about adequacy and legal representation over a year ago, and he has been involved in discussions of adequate school funding for over a decade. Back in 2004, when Dr. Register was superintendent of Hamilton County Schools, he was involved with a coalition of 16 statewide groups called the Coalition for Tennessee's Future. This group commissioned an independent study on public school funding in Tennessee. Here are some remarks that Dr. Register made during his State of the Schools address in 2004. Quote, I presented a summary of the results last week in Nashville to the BEP Review Committee that will make a final report to the State Board of Education by November 1. The results of the study were staggering. Using 2 proven research methods, the study concluded that public education in Tennessee is underfunded by $1.2 billion per year. Adequacy simply means giving schools adequate resources so that school students can achieve the goals established by the state and by the federal government. In other words, by giving schools the resources necessary for success. In Tennessee, we remain near the bottom in per pupil funding for public education. That was 11 years ago. So clearly, this issue of adequate school funding has been a long-standing problem in Tennessee. And finally, I will say this. Last week, about 30 members of our Metro Council signed a letter urging us to join other urban school boards in challenging the state of Tennessee's failure to adequately fund the BEP. Nashville is responsible for about 2/3 of school funding, but the council needs our help to ensure that the state provides the remaining funds necessary for our schools to succeed. If we do not hold the state accountable, we are placing an undue burden on Nashville and on our Metro Council. This is the fiscally responsible thing to do. In conclusion, I believe it's in the best interest of our students to explore every avenue possible to ensure that our schools and our students are provided with adequate funding. Otherwise, we'll be voting against an extra $73 million per year in funding, which would go a long way in meeting the very great needs of our predominantly low-income student population. Challenging the state to provide adequate funding for schools is not a distraction. It is our job as elected school board members to ensure that our students have all of the resources they need to succeed. And that's it.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question. What's the difference between litigation dialogue and actually voting tonight to go forward with the pursuit of a lawsuit?
I think, what I described earlier was gathering information that could go into a draft complaint, for instance. That draft complaint could be shared with the 4-class board members. The 4-class boards could also be shared with the administration, with the Attorney General, with the people who would be the defendants in the lawsuit. We can do that before filing the lawsuit and let them know what we think our case is as negotiation. But to answer your question, litigation discussion would be gathering information. We're not recommending you would actually be an outlier with the class districts if you voted tonight to file a lawsuit. That would be a separate vote.
Madam Chairman, I move to defer the motion or the action toniate.
There's no action. So I just want to make sure there's no motion.
No motion.
And so when you read that in your email to, I can't remember to whom you sent it, this was a discussion. If a motion comes out of this, then you can then make another motion. But right now, there is no motion to do anything.
Okay.
But hold that thought. I feel one coming. You have anything?
Yeah, I do. Just a point of clarification. That was a resolution that was passed by the board, so that was our responsibility. Okay, so if those actions failed, then that was our failure, but not anybody else's, but just ours. Okay. I'm going to read something as well. In stating the obvious, our schools and MNPS deserve to be fully funded as mandated by state law. As a district, I do not ever remember receiving our fair share of state funding to educate our students in MNPS. Unfortunately, our students are the losers in this game of state takeaway. Having made these statements begs the question, do I think that the first step out of the block should be to join in litigation talk? And for many reasons, I do not. Reason number one, we have right now the most important decision we may ever make as a member of this Board of Education. We have been tasked with the responsibility to find a new director of schools. And not just any director of schools, but we needed a director of schools extraordinaire. And as a board, we need to keep our laser focus on this task. Our students deserve this, at the very least. All eyes are on us, and we do not need any further distractions. Reason number two, lawsuits are expensive. They cost real money. We do not have the ability as a Board of Education to raise taxes, nor are we self-funding. We rely on our mayor and our Metro Council to fund us and hold us accountable to the funding that they provide for us. Several of our Metro Council representatives, my own included, have indicated through a letter that they want us to pursue adequate funding and to use a lawsuit as a last-step resort. The precious resources that we receive from our mayor and our council representatives need to be used for educational purposes. Likewise, I have received many emails from my constituents and yours to use litigation as a last resort effort and not the first. We may yet have to pursue litigation, but that should be a last step effort. And number three, we have a newly appointed Commissioner of Education with Dr. Candace McQueen. Dr. McQueen is familiar with our school district and those others similar to us and the needs that we have in a richly diverse and multi-challenging system that we have. As a matter of professional courtesy, I think we need to have a conversation around the table with Dr. McQueen and other stakeholders at the state level to make sure that our case to the state of Tennessee that we need to have our schools fully funded as mandated by our Constitution. Decisions like these are not easy ones. We will have more like these. That's why we get paid the big bucks. As one constituent stated, take 1, 2, 3 deep breaths and let cooler heads prevail. I suggest that we have a conversation around the table with the stakeholders on both the state and local levels, getting around the funding issue. The first thing that needs to happen is that Metro Nashville Public Schools needs to receive the $3.4 million that was illegally withheld from our district. The second thing that needs to happen is that we need to have this across the table conversation within the next 30 days. If that doesn't happen within the next 30 days, then we need to, as a board, revisit this topic. Thank you.
Do you have anything? Okay. Mr. Pinkston?
I think what Ms. Shepherd said is the right approach, and I would like to make a motion that says the board shall direct the director of schools to approach the governor in the state of Tennessee and request that the state take immediate steps to fully fund the basic education program and address BEP inadequacy, and that the director shall report back to the board within, as Ms. Shepherd said, 30 days. And 30 days from now would be Thursday, March 9th. So I'll make my motion, and then I've got a few other kind of framing remarks, if that's okay.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second.
So,
Ms. Shepherd and Ms. Froke.
So I'm not advocating for litigation yet either. I think this is about, the conversation as I see it statewide is about us doing some due diligence about what the state's obligations really are. So at the end of the day, the state's obligation is embodied in the Tennessee Constitution, and there's a lot of very complicated case law and statutes that have been established over the last 30 years, which essentially govern the system of school funding in Tennessee. And it's just unfortunately one of those situations where it's impossible to have a discussion about the BEP without having legal counsel in the room. So I think what I feel this is about is making the case first, getting it straight amongst ourselves and our fellow urban districts about what the state is legally obligated to do. And what happens, as we know, in urban areas is substantively different than rural and suburban. Civil rights questions come more into play here, which again, requires legal counsel. So I think none of this necessarily has to end up in court, and I don't think it precludes us from doing what Dr. Register has said. I think we can ultimately walk and chew gum at the same time. I do want to point out there have been a lot of numbers flying around about the BEP, but the legislature, the state government's own admission, their BEP review committee says the program is underfunded by at least $484 million. That is a conservative estimate. A lot of other experts I think the number is probably closer to $1 billion or more. But for the sake of the argument, let's go with a smaller number. In Nashville alone, our share of additional funding would be in excess of $30 million annually. That's money we can put toward professional development for teachers, reducing class sizes for English learners, expanding early childhood education, and everything else that we have said is important to us. And I feel like we need to just be willing to stand up for our schools and our students because no one else is going to do it. Another number, I'm sending around some data from the Council of the Great City Schools. The council estimates our per pupil funding currently at $8,786. It's a little, I think, a lagging indicator. I think it's a little bit more than that right now. But they essentially rank us 54th out of 67 urban school districts in America, behind, among others, Atlanta, Austin, Charlotte, and Louisville. In a community where we fund 65% of public education locally, that is a direct commentary on the lack of state funding. And the reality is, I think we all know that we cannot get from where we are to where we need to be without more resources. Parents know it, teachers know it, we ought to recognize it, and the important part is let's do something about it. So, you know, as echo something Ms. Frog said a minute ago, I think this, you know, kind of not engaging in a bigger conversation sends a terrible message to our friends at the Metro Council who have encouraged us to join not litigation, but a legal dialogue around adequacy. One of the council members told me after seeing Dr. Register's comments, quote, "We are tired of MNPS treating the council like an ATM machine. It's time to stand up to the state and say what we think is right," and I agree. Last point, let's talk about time for a minute. 1,514 days, that is how long the governor has been in office. He has not once addressed the inadequacies of the BEP. Not 455 days ago when the school board first unanimously asked him to look at the problem. Not 403 days ago when he appointed a BEP task force and gave them explicit instructions to not discuss adequacy. Not 119 days ago when the board again asked the governor unanimously to deal with the problem. In the middle of all these pleas, though, he did see fit to punish our teachers, pass legislation to strip us of our authority on charter schools, fine us $3.4 million for being uppity. Now he's pushing vouchers, which will drain tens of millions of dollars from our schools. I think we've been patient, but I'm tired of seeing the community abused by bad state policies and funding inadequacies. Again, this is about students in schools. So the last thing I'll say, something's going to happen with or without us, even if we voted against ultimately a legal dialogue statewide. These other districts are going to proceed independently or as a group, and if that happens, we risk our district, our students and teachers being left out when the time comes for the state to make concessions or for a court to award summary judgment if it ever comes to that. So put differently, a wise man once said, we can either be at the table or we can be on the menu, but I don't think we have to decide today. I like the 30-day concept that Ms. Shepherd brought.
The date that you have here, March 9th?
March 9th. It would be 30 days, excuse me, April 9th. Pardon me.
Okay.
I misspoke.
Anything else from anyone else? Thank the two of you very much for coming. That was lots of great information. This is probably one of the best discussions that we've had around this table in a very, very long time. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I am always impressed by the depth to which we will go as individuals to inform ourselves and reach out to others to make sure that we have the right information available when we have to make these tough decisions. But I have to say that, you know, I agree. One of the probably most, as I was working on my doctorate, the course that got me the most animated was on school funding. And just you know, someone who has a science background and it's either black or white and I don't deal well in the gray, and you hear two statements, that the state created the formula and the state knows it's underfunded. And it comes out almost in the same breath. And so I think that this is not us being uppity this time in asking for some real conversation around what are the plans at the state level to revisit this concept, to make some gains or progress towards you know, following their own formula is basically all that we're asking them to do. So thank you guys very much. Oh yeah, now we have to vote. So you've heard the motion. Thank you. Yeah. You're paying attention and everything. You've heard
I'm sorry, I just have one other thing I want to say relative to the motion. It says, if you don't mind, I look over your shoulder, to approach the governor, request that the state take immediate steps, and the director shall report back to the board. I just want to clarify that I think, immediate steps in whatever the report back hopefully says the governor recognizes the inadequacies in the formula and acknowledges that, which he has not done to date, and that he and Commissioner McQueen make a commitment to a multi-year plan to address it.
Yeah, so and that's what the thing I was trying to allude to.
If they come back with another BEP task force that's going to kick the can down the road for another year,
that's not the answer.
Yeah, that's not good.
No. So you've read and heard the motion, and we've had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very
Can I
much.
make another motion?
You may.
All right. I would also move that we engage in another board discussion on the topic on April 14th.
So that it's on the agenda. You don't need that on a motion, but
okay,
we'll put that
I'll
on the
move it.
agenda.
Okay, please put it on the agenda then.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Now we go into reports, director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 items to discuss tonight, and if I may, I think I would ask that we address item 2 first. I think it'll probably take less discussion than item 1. I want to introduce 2 people who are here tonight. 3, okay. You'll have to, Chris, you'll have to introduce your other guest tonight. As you know, we entered into a contract with Mass Insight just a few meetings ago to look at the way we're organized to support priority schools in our district and the way we're organized essentially as a school system to deal with priority schools. And Mass Insight came highly recommended. They've been on board, and we put an almost unmanageable timeline on them, and they agreed to that. And they've been on the ground and working even in spite of the snow and the ice. And perhaps part of that's because they're from Boston. And there's less snow here than there is in Boston.
With due respect, I don't see snow on the ground here.
That's
and in
correct.
Boston, we've got about 3 feet still melting.
Okay. So we have tonight Chris Mayer, who is the president and CEO of Mass Insight, and Pete Cook, who is the project manager here. And I'll turn it over to Chris and let him say some words and give you some introduction into what's going on with the work and to further introduce himself and his other colleagues.
We'll just be brief, and then if you have questions, feel free to ask him. I'm Chris Mayer. I'm the president, not the CEO, but I appreciate the upgrade. Pete Cook is an engagement manager. He's been with us for a number of years and has a lot of experience doing this exact type of work. He led it in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, which is the largest district in the state, where the result led to a large reorganization, pumping resources back into schools, and has resulted in increased student achievement across the board in that district. Mariah Deans is a project coordinator. I want to introduce her as well. She's working on it. She's actually just moved to New Orleans from Nashville, so she knows a lot about our city. She's our little local, gives us the local angle. And then you'll see Anu Padabiraman. Am I saying that right? She's been with us for years. I just can't pronounce her name. But Anu you will also see around. So Pete, Anu, and Mariah will be down on the ground here on a weekly basis. They already have been. They've been interviewing a number of the leadership here at central office to get some information. And then because we're an organization that believes that the reason that this entire building exists is to serve children in schools, we always get the school's perspective. That's actually probably where we do some of our deepest digging, because we want to see how they're feeling served. Anything you want to add? No. It is a pretty ridiculous timeline. We're going to do our best to meet it, but we're here every week on the ground. So if you see these people around, you probably won't see me very often, but you'll see a number of them around. Any questions?
Any questions? Ms. Shepherd?
Your timeline on this project?
We have another 4 weeks.
Pardon me?
Another 4 weeks.
Another 4 weeks,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we're happy to give you guys information and do a give and take. And sometimes the first report that we give you have follow-up questions based on what we give you. But normally we do a diagnostic that's based off of our turnaround challenge report that has 10 domains. Here in, because of the timeline and the scope, we've shrunk it down to 3 or 4 that we were asked to focus on. Because we already know you guys had a different diagnostic very recently. Any other questions?
Anyone else?
Thank you very much. I'd like
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Just a comment, if I may. Our last conversation was as late as this afternoon, just before the board meeting, as a matter of fact. But I think I'm very impressed with the quality of work that's going on. And what I want to say to the board is that there are really 2 pressures, and one for such a quick timeline is to see if there are some short-term gains in terms of an impact on our budget this year. As we said in the budget work session earlier, we have a placeholder in the I-Zone office, that office, and it would be nice for us to be able to see some of the results of the study, to have some, if any, impact on that study. But more importantly is a strategy or a strategic look at how we're organized that will inform the next director of schools. I think it's very timely to use a consultant who can give us some very constructive advice on what it looks like going forward after that point in time. And as you all know, I'm a short timer, and I can't take action on a lot of what we hear. But I think this will inform the board and inform the next director of schools a good strategic plan moving forward. So I hope, and if you have any comment about that, that would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we do 2 types of work. We do some short-term work, but what we really focus on are long-term performance partnerships. So where we hold ourselves accountable for student outcomes. And, this is a short-term diagnostic. What we've done with other districts is do that, and then in some cases, that's all they want. In other cases, they're looking for a longer-term, on-the-ground, what we call performance partnership, where we work with districts to create sustainable and scalable internal solutions in their school systems to get the type of results that we all want for children.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here tonight. The first item on the director's report is inclement weather response, and I'm going to ask Fred to come to the mic if you would. And I'll introduce this by saying that the weather this year has been unusual, to say the least. We have missed 10 days of school, 10 student days of school, and I don't know how long it's been since we've missed that many days of school. Certainly well before my tenure here. Dr. Brannon, you may recall when we hit a 10-day limit, but we wanted to, and we've had a number of questions from not only board members but also members of the community about how we deal with that. Questions ranging from how much are we going to make up, what do we have to make up, can we bypass that, to is there a way to stagger returning to school based on what conditions are like in particular localities. Fred Carr, our Chief Operating Officer, has the challenge of making the call. And I think that from some of the information that you've received, you can see the extent to which the work occurs, and I'm sure Fred would invite you to participate with him through the course of a night and a day when there is a threat or when we're doing this. But I've asked Fred to speak to this, and also Fred and Larry Collier's back there to just make in terms of a public announcement. What are we doing about makeup? What does our calendar say now? And how do we proceed from now on, assuming no more snow or ice?
So I'll answer the first question first, and Larry might want to come and provide some support. But We've updated the website to show that the state has approved our request to waive 2 attendance days. So we will be making up 3 days on March 18th, 19th, and 20th. We had 5 days built into the calendar. The state has waived 2, so that covers all 10 days that we have missed due to inclement weather. We did get a notification from the state earlier today that they approved our waiver request for 2 days. The good news about that is that we don't have to change our end of the year schedules, graduation and testing and all of that. All of those dates that are really already set, we can keep those dates intact. This is an opportunity for board discussion, and I tried to set up the opportunity for discussion by creating a scenario and going through a list of questions that we have actually generated when we've looked at this topic before as transportation staff and administrative staff to get some feedback from the board about some of the kind of on-the-ground issues that we have to deal with. In the board packet, I included a map, which I'll refer to in just a minute, and our MNPS inclement weather policy, several other school districts around the country, inclement weather policy that was sent to me that do partial closings and partial openings. And then some public comments from where Joe Bass posted this discussion item on social media and got a lot of parent and community input on the topic. And then a suggestion from a parent about creating a rubric to look at to understand how students live in one place and go to school in another, and how employees live in one place and go to school in another. And I really probably didn't mean to include all 100 and something pages of that, but I thought it was a shorter PDF when I sent it. But I think you can see from the complexity of the school zone where students live and the number of different schools that they attend, that having school choice in Nashville is a very active choice that a lot of families make. It does create some additional kinds of issues when we're working as a district to look at district-wide kinds of things like school opening and school closing. So what I did was take the map of Davidson County, and because the north end of the county usually gets the blame for having a lot of ice and snow when it's not in the southern end of the county, I just kind of drew an arbitrary line across the top third of the county. And then on the sheet that I sent you, I took those schools that are north of that arbitrary line in the county and listed the schools and listed the student enrollment. And it comes out to 16 schools, which is about 11% of our schools. And it also just happens to come out at 9,650 students, which is also 11% of our student population. And to set the stage for discussion, I just generated a list of questions, again, that we have talked about before. They are the on-the-ground challenges that we have to consider if we're going to reopen schools in a staggered sequence after a snow event, which is usually what we run into. Closing schools is usually a pretty easy decision in terms of weather fronts coming through and that sort of thing, but opening is where we have ice in shady areas in certain parts of the county, but other parts of the county are clear, and that's where a lot of parents, particularly in toward the center of the city, will say, you know, I looked out my window and everything looks great, why can't my kid go to school? And so I've just generated this list of questions for the board to discuss and provide feedback. And I've divided it into logistics and human capital and family questions, and then threw in a philosophical question just to generate discussion. So I can go through the questions or can open it up for discussion. And Dr. Majors has taken notes for me over there of the discussion, so we can take it back and I can remember what was said. Logistics is the challenge. Logistics, we run 550 school buses every day, regular ed and special ed. And my guiding principle has been that we want 0 children hurt. And we've been through the last 3 weeks of some pretty amazing weather in Nashville, and we've had 0 children hurt and 0 employees hurt because of decisions that we made. And that is the standard that I have used. And we have looked at school buses as the catalyst for determining that standard, whether school buses can run or not. We transport about 50,000 of our 85,000 students on school buses. And we pick up in neighborhoods all over, actually some neighborhoods that some people in emergency management didn't even know existed when we were working down there last week. I didn't know you sent a school bus there. Yes, we sent a school bus there. So it's 535 square miles and 550 buses rolling every day, and that's the challenge that we have.
Ms. Shepherd, you had a question?
I noticed there, in looking over these comments, there are several comments around having the clusters open and close in sync. And then you touched on school choice. So I can think of one elementary school in my cluster just off the top of my head that was, when it was built, it was a true neighborhood school. And now as the neighborhood has aged out, it's a 50% lottery school. And so it has created multiple issues around how those parents get in and out of the building without causing, a traffic jam, and we're still working on that. But so those are the schools and those are the students that concern me the most, are the ones that their parents have to provide them transportation because we don't provide it for them. And so if this school is in Old Hickory and said parent lives in East Nashville, how do they get to school? Because they don't live in the cluster, but they do attend school in that cluster. So it's one of those things where you're going to be faulted for whatever decision you make. It's not going to please everybody all the time, and we know that. But I do appreciate your number one concern in that we don't want any of our students injured or hurt or standing out there in the cold weather because they don't have appropriate clothing on. And I do appreciate your efforts around getting food boxes to those students who rely on, and those families who rely on food during the school day. So I think those were heroic measures, and I do appreciate all that y'all do.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Major.
Anyone else? Ms. Pierce?
I just want to thank you, Fred. This is really comprehensive, and it was just 2 weeks ago, that we brought this up. So I do think, at least from parents in my district, they're wanting to know that you're looking, and so I really appreciate this report, and I'm wondering if there is a way that we can continue to compile this in a way that lets people know the stages, or does this mean it's off the table, that we're going to keep the current system, and or are there going to be any more considerations to doing something differently? The other thing that I heard repeatedly was just the lack of communication from a child's teacher or the school to go, we just want to keep the learning going. And Dr. Steele and I were in a technology meeting today that was, exciting to think about the process if we can have the community come together and we get the access, anytime access for our students, and we can incorporate lessons in the Blackboard and that kind of thing so the learning doesn't necessarily have to stop. And even with the second closing last week, schools were already addressing and sending home snow packets. So that was also very much appreciated by parents. But I really do. I thank you very much for considering. I know I've been pinging you I've got a lot of parents with a lot of ideas, and so I appreciate you really taking the time to open the websites and look at them. And the matrix, that just like boggles of numbers. I couldn't figure that one out. But I appreciate you doing that.
I'm going to sit down with the parent and get him to walk me through it so that I can
almost want to
understand.
I want to come watch. Like, I was amazed. It was like a big Sudoku puzzle.
It really is, and we've actually he and I have emailed back and forth, and there are some interesting possibilities there. I'm just going to have to understand it a little bit before we can get into it. And I think to go to Dr. Steele's departments and the district's department's continuous improvement model, I think we're always open to continuous improvement, and I don't think we need to say we've always done it this way and we need to continue to do it this way. With this particular decision, there are so many competing interests and concerns that I really feel like we have to answer some of those before we take the step to do it. I would really hate to go out there and make a decision without having thought all the way through it and all of the what ifs and could be's and that sort of thing. I think the thought of the snow packets, the electronic learning, hopefully that will continue to improve. It is certainly our key focus is a digital delivery of curriculum. And I think as we move forward over the next short period of time, actually, in terms of choosing digital curriculum, getting it out to students, and then the Anytime Access for All, Google coming to town, all of that coming together is very exciting, and it's real, and it's right here in front of us.
Right. And I do think that continued partnership with Metro Public Works, so even if it's clearing those streets and those chronic icy patches that you've mentioned in that upper third of the district, is making sure that those streets are salted early and cleared early as soon as they get past their main arteries and all of that. So it seemed like we started working together with them towards the end, but I think parents would just love to know that we're doing all that we can to get the kids back in school as soon as possible and considering snow routes in that regard. So thank you.
If I could give a real positive shout out to Public Works. We had not done this before. Several years ago, while we had the snow team out running the roads, we started taking pictures and sending them to our communications department, who would then post them on the web. This time, we also sent them to Public Works, who was stationed down at Emergency Management. And we would send the picture with the address, and they would immediately dispatch somebody out to deal with it. Part of the challenge with the ice event 2 weeks ago was, while they were able to salt it until the temperatures rose a little bit, it didn't have any effect. But they were able to respond immediately. So we've implemented that now as a permanent solution, because we have people out specifically looking at roads, and we know where to go, we know where our problem spots are. So rather than just calling it in, we email the picture from our phones directly to OEM and get an instant response. And so that's new, that came out of this learning experience with handling countywide emergencies.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question about how the closure of, or the absence of several children on any one given day would affect the ADA, the average daily attendance. At one time, we were penalized for excessive absences. And so that plays into this as well.
There are two considerations that I can think of, and Chris and Jay may think of a couple more, but one is ADA for funding is determined at 3 different points during the year. ADM, I'm sorry, is determined at 3 different points during the year. So it's a monthly average of 3 separate months during the year. So at 4 separate months, see, I said Christmas, fix me on that.
You want to get to the mic.
Come on. So it could affect that a little bit. The other consideration is the state's requirement for attendance in our schools is part of what the state judges us on in terms of academic performance. Student attendance is one of those data points, so it could affect that also.
Yeoman's job.
Thank you very much. Do I need to send you a picture of my house because the street was missed? Driveway, done. Okay, guess not.
Madam Chair, that concludes the director's report.
All right, thank you. Committee reports. Ms. Shepherd, class.
Let's see, a few things, bills to note. The vouchers bill, very similar to the governor's proposal last year, is swiftly progressing through the House and the Senate, which is something we need to keep an eye on. Teacher evaluations, the administration is sponsoring a bill that would reduce the impact of the new assessments that they have on teacher evaluations. There's an important bill on tuition equity that for our students that passed through the Senate Education Committee. It would allow our undocumented students who meet some qualifications to get in state tuition, which gives them an important path for the future. Fiscal capacity, Chairman Brooks has brought a bill that would require the fiscal capacity portion of the BEP to be given to districts by May 1st, which would really increase our ability to be able to plan better around our budgeting process. And there's one other bill, and it doesn't actually pertain to education, but it's a handgun bill that it's they're pushing this through. They're not allowing local municipalities to opt out as they did before. So this would allow guns in places that we don't need them. So please keep an eye on that one. I think it's very important. I found that out one day last week. That concludes my class report.
Keep going.
Oh, okay. All right, so budget and finance. We had our first operating budget meeting today at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Henson. We will have our second meeting 2 weeks from today on the 24th at the same time at 3:30. We will plan on having that at a full hour-and-a-half meeting because I'm encouraging my colleagues to go home and do a deep dive into this year's operating budget. And as you are diving, please write down your questions and corral all of those to Ms. Bobo so that we can have answers by the time we come to our next board meeting. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pinkston.
Yes, we had a community engagement committee meeting yesterday, which was March 9th, and had two primary topics of discussion. One was reviewing some selected excerpts from the recent MNPS performance audit, some recommendations that were specific to communications and community engagement. For example, talked a little bit about a constituent appeals board, which apparently was established last August, and learning a little bit more about what that administrative body is and what it does. And Mr. Majors, they tell us you chair it, and we'd love to get a report from you at a future date. Second topic of discussion was community, public engagement, I should say, around the director search, and we kicked around some ideas, got a little bit of a preview of the message that was brought to us earlier this evening by the very multifaceted coalition, and I believe, Madam Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, whenever we have our scoping meeting with the search firm, this is one of the topics that will be high on the list for them to consider and advise us on.
Yep.
Last issue that came up is we have been in an ongoing discussion about rewrites, or revisions, I should say, of EE3, which is the key governing policy that governs board expectations of the director relative to, I think the policy is called treatment of parents, citizens, and parents, students, and citizens. It could use a better title than that, so maybe we'll look at that along the way. But Ms. Pierce has some ideas. I've got some ideas. We're going to jointly share our thoughts with for some public input from organizations, including the Parent Advisory Council and also this group that came before us earlier tonight, and get some thoughts and bring us hopefully some consensus recommendations as the policy revision process ramps up later this spring. Thank you.
Next meeting.
Oh, next meeting. Monday, these meetings are on the first Mondays of every month, so the next meeting will be Monday, April 6th at 4 p.m. at the Martin Center for Professional Development, 2400 Fairfax Avenue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Announcements. Dr. Brannon?
Yesterday, Dr. McQueen, as a part of her statewide tour, visited Haywood, Whitsett, and Stratford in our district. I'd also like to announce that the deadline for the Bernard Harris Scholarship for STEM students is April 8th. You can go to the Council of Great City Schools website to get that application. And we had over 300 teachers and staff members from different cities yesterday visiting our city for the Academies of Nashville at the Music City Center. So well represented. You represented us well. That concludes my announcements.
Thank you. Yesterday, I was able to participate in the Tennessee School Board Association SCOPE conference. It's Student Congress on Policies and Education. It's held every year in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I was a moderator of we had 20 students in my group, and they were arguing the pro side of the debate question: a basic computer coding class shall be required for graduation. These students were very astute in this topic, and they had no problem arguing the pro side of this argument, and Dr. Ray would have been very proud of these students. The Music Makes Us Advisory Board, of which I represent our Board of Education, met last Wednesday, March the 4th, at Rose Park Middle Magnet School. We were entertained by several solo performances and the flute choir from Rose Park. There are so many great things going on in our schools around the music and the arts. At this meeting, it was announced that CMA, through fanfare, donated $840,000 in February of this year to our schools in Metro Nashville. This brings their total at $8.4 million. So when you're out and about and you're going down honky-tonking down on Broadway and you see a CMA performer, please thank them, because they perform for free so that all the proceeds can come to CMA and then come to us. And then yesterday, my colleagues and I received an email saying that District Administration Magazine has named Metro Schools a District of Distinction, thanks to the rising graduation rates around the success of the Academies of Nashville models. So only 62 districts in this country got that distinction, so kudos to everyone who's involved with that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to the good music and art, we also have some good athletics going on. So big shout out to MLK's Lady Royals for winning the state basketball championship. Big deal.
Mr. Pinkston?
Basketball, Hillsborough High School boys basketball team will be competing in state tomorrow at 2:45 at MTSU, and if they win, they will go on to the finals on Friday. On Thursday, West End Middle School will host their Chinese Lantern Festival. And then this weekend, the 13th to the 16th, Hillsborough High School will host Hairspray. All performances are at 7 p.m., and they say it's going to be an amazing show. And then also at Hillsborough High School on April 2nd at 6:30, I believe at 6:30, the Hillsborough High School PTSO, along with the Tennessee Education Report, will be hosting a mayoral forum. We'll have an education focus. I think it'll be a great one for you to come out to. Steve Cavendish will be moderating. And then on a sad note, we do want to express our condolences to the family of Lavonzel Taylor. He was a Hillsborough High School freshman who died a week ago today from a sudden and rare heart condition. We want to give our condolences to his family, and there is a GoFundMe that I'm going to post on my Facebook if people want to make contributions to their family.
Other business, this meeting is adjourned.